This is the F9F-8 Cougar. Let me start off by saying that this is not a top tier jet, despite its battle rating. That being said, I'm going to show you how you can fly this thing. Let's go! Hello you sexy beasts, welcome back to War Thunder. You guys really seem to like the way I say War Thunder. War Thunder. Anyhow, as I said before, this is the Cougar, the new American top battle rating jet introduced in the Naval line. Not quite a top tier jet, however. Let's just make this very clear right from the start. This aircraft was way overhyped when it was first announced at the developer blogs before the update came out, and people really overestimated what this thing can actually do, or let's just say they fantasized a little bit too much about what this thing really is. The F9F Cougar is not exactly on par with aircraft like the MiG-17, the MiG-15Bs, the Hunter, the F-86s. That's not the role of this aircraft. We will go over some of the stats of this aircraft, some of the properties of how it flies, how you can actually use it, and hopefully by the end of this video you will understand that this is not a primary fighter, but still have the knowledge to do very well in this aircraft. Now, starting off with the outward appearance. As you can see, the F9F-8 has swept wings, and that's pretty much the main difference between this and the early F9F-5. The armament stays the same, and the engine stays the same. Now, the swept wings do allow it to have a higher top speed of up to 1041 km per hour at around 600 meters. That being said, you will rarely ever reach these top speeds, and that is because of the engine of this aircraft. The engine featured on the Cougar has great acceleration at low speeds, which is to be expected since this thing is a naval aircraft and is supposed to be able to take off from carriers. However, it does struggle quite heavily once you go above certain speeds, around 600 km per hour, 700 km per hour. You're going to notice a heavy lack of acceleration. It just doesn't want to go above a certain speed. In most combat situations, you'll be lucky to have reached 800 km per hour. Now, that being said, even though the acceleration is quite bad at higher speeds, I do have to give this thing one thing. It has really decent climb rate. I usually go up to around 600 km per hour to start the match, and then go into a 15-degree climb, and I gotta say, this thing has no problem whatsoever climbing. Now, do expect that there will be aircraft above you, stuff like the ME-163 for example. They will have absolutely no problem being above you, but generally you seem to be around the same altitude as the MiG-15s most of the time. You can even climb up to MiG-17s, not the MiG-17s, but the Tu-4 on the first pass and actually get some shots into them, although it's not really recommended as you will be at high altitude and pretty much dead in the water in front of the guns of a Tu-4. Speaking of the wings, as you've probably noticed by watching this aircraft, the wings are actually quite larger in area than the wings on the F9F-5, which results in a really good turn rate. The wind loading of this aircraft is surprisingly low and results in this thing just being able to turn pretty well. Now, at low speeds is kind of not the case. The swept wings do kind of have an issue with keeping this thing in the air at lower speeds, but at higher speeds, this thing can pull up to 10-11 Gs, and with the boost and tilt can even break your wings at around 12 Gs. Beware of that. Not only are the wings massive, the ailerons are also massive. And I mean absolutely massive. What this results in is a very good roll rate. This thing is almost comparable to the Sabre in its roll rate, which is a massive advantage when combined together with the very good turn rate. In fact, what this aircraft lacks in speed and acceleration, it just makes up for in agility. I could actually compare this thing very closely to an aircraft in the British tech tree, the Venom. And in fact, if you know how to play the Venom, do try to play the Cougar in the same kind of playstyle, which is not being the primary fighter, never being really alone. If you are caught alone with your pants down in a Cougar, especially if you have to go up against MiG-17s or Steel-13s. You kind of are in the disadvantage, despite being a 9.0 aircraft as well. But this thing is an excellent support fighter. It's a second line fighter. It's a very good evader. It can bait enemy aircraft very well that try to focus on you. And given the 4 20mm cannons mounted on the nose with a lot of ammo and just the overall agility, you're also very good at intercepting enemies that are on the tails of your friendlies. Speaking of the guns, we haven't lost too many words on those just yet. As I said before, 4 20mm M3 cannons. Now, these cannons do have a very good fire rate and a lot of ammo, 760 rounds in total to be exact. And this is exactly the same armament and ammo load as on the F9F-8 and the F9F-2, if I am not mistaken. That being said, you get less choices when it comes to ordnance. In fact, where you could actually take rockets on the F9F-5, such thing cannot be done on the F9F-8 Cougar. This name is getting very complicated. You only have a choice between 2 1000-pounder bombs or 4 500-pounder bombs, which kind of limits the effectiveness of this thing in combined battles against player tanks. It can generally just do 1 or 2 drops before having to go back to base and rearm. Now the guns themselves, if you are familiar with M3 cannons, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When these guns are stuck, they feel very inaccurate. They are... how can I describe this? They are very shotgunny. They're essentially shotguns in the 20mm caliber. Not very accurate, which can work in your favor if you are not a good shot and some of this dispersion might actually help you land more hits. But it's not so good when you have to make sure that your shots are accurate when going, for example, for the wings of TU4s or going for head-ons at long ranges. Thankfully, once the guns are fully upgraded, you do definitely notice a big improvement in accuracy and in fact makes this thing quite the nasty head-on machine. Just like the Venom in the British tech tree, the guns on the Cougar are all mounted on the nose. 4 20mm cannons mounted right under the nose. Now a little tip here, it might be a good idea to actually use vertical targeting with this aircraft. I've had this question in the comments last time, so I think I'm just going to explain it a little bit here. Vertical targeting is essentially the same concept as zeroing in your sniper scope. Essentially what you're doing is adjusting the angle of your guns upwards to make sure that all your bullets hit the target you're aiming at whatever range you've set your guns to. Now, this is not so important when your guns are all very closely mounted, at least in terms of height, to your gun sight. However, with guns of different calibers, different muzzle velocities, or in this case, guns that are mounted under the fuselage and as such pretty much as far away from your gun sight as they can be, it is a nice idea to enable vertical targeting to around, usually what I do is 500 meters. The vertical targeting is, by the way, bound to the same distance that your gun convergence is bound, so keep an eye out for that. And it kind of helps with getting shots on target a little bit more. Although, given enough practice, you can get these 20mm cannons on target quite a lot, and in fact you can switch from the default belts to the stealth belts, which have just a little bit more explosive potential, so to speak. Now, as I said before, this aircraft is not exactly a dedicated fighter. The Cougar definitely depends on having teammates just present, really. It depends really on the skill of the pilot as well. It's not the easiest aircraft to fly. Don't get into the Cougar expecting that you can just carry matches by yourself. That is rarely going to happen, although in some cases, if the enemy chooses to ignore you, you can definitely do it. You definitely have some enemies that underestimate the actual capabilities of this aircraft in the right hands. So, what exactly can you really do? See, even though your acceleration at high speeds is horrible and you do have a lower top speed than most of the jets you will come up against, your roll rate in combination with the good turn rate and the good guns, given that they are upgraded, make for a nasty surprise to the enemy. I've had multiple situations where I had MiG-15s and MiG-17s trying to go head-on with me, and, well, they don't really stand a chance. I mean, even though they have the bigger cannons, they have a lesser volume of fire. And since you can use your roll rate to evade incoming fire quite effectively, if you know how to head-on, don't just stick the head-on, if that makes any sense. Generally what I do is start firing at around 2 kilometers distance, and at the very, very, very latest I pull out at 1 kilometer. And generally, my shots hit and theirs don't. And the thing is, even if their shots do hit, this is a naval fighter. Remember, naval fighters tend to be heavier than their land-based counterparts, but they make up for it in stronger resistance to damage. Now, sadly, this only applies to bullets. This thing is quite resistant to bullets, except for the wings themselves, which are quite a big target. But the fuselage can take shots and not have too much of an issue. That doesn't really apply when you land, however. I've had situations where my gear wouldn't work, or just tried to land on belly, and sadly this is one of those aircraft where you just can not belly land whatever you try to do. I mean, you can, but you will break your wings off and you will not be able to complete a repair. That being said, since this thing is a naval fighter, you do get a tail hook, which is very useful in making those quick landings on aircraft carriers, and given that aircraft carriers spawn you in the air right after at around 600 km/h, it's one of the fastest way to both land and to get back up in the air and already be at combat speeds. Win-win situation. So essentially what you want to be doing in this aircraft when you're not trying to land is chase after enemies. But not just any enemy. Do try to ignore enemies that are by themselves just running away from the battle, enemies that are climbing away, because for the most part you're not going to catch them. Instead, climb at the start of the match and try to stay above your team. Let the first couple of minutes pass and see what is going on. If any of the enemies tries to go into head-on with you, especially if they are MiG-15s, do try that. I would avoid going head-ons with CL-13 and stuff like that because they do have more accurate guns, but MiG-15s, no problem, just go head-on with them. After a couple of minutes have passed, look around, look at your team, and if you see your teammates being engaged by a fighter, dive on that fighter. This thing is an excellent support aircraft, and really its biggest role, its best role is to defend your friendlies. If you see a MiG-15 on the tail of a hunter which for some stupid reason is trying to turn fight with the MiG-15, kill the MiG-15. He's going to be focused on your teammates and it's going to be a very easy kill for you. And given that you have so much ammo, you can generally stay until the end of the battle, no problem, and still have ammo left over. But Mike, what if they are focusing on me? Well, you see, the great combination of roll rate and turn time of this thing makes it for a very good just evading aircraft. You can bait enemies into trying to turn with you, you can use your air brakes to get them in front of your guns, you can roll away from them, especially against the MiG-15s, they really struggle rolling with you, so you can explode it very, very heavily. Hunter is the same thing, CL-13s not so much, but you can generally outturn CL-13s at higher speeds. However, there's one thing I have to warn you about. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, guys, if you're currently flying the F9F-8 whilst listening to this video, and you just tried doing what I told you about and suddenly saw your wings rip off, I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you one thing. See, this is the biggest just weak spot of the F9F-8 Cougar, without which it would just be, honestly in my mind, a perfect support aircraft. Whilst the wings are very sturdy when it comes to positive G maneuvers, if you do the slightest negative G maneuver at high speeds, your wings just fall off. They just fall off. 5G's negative, they're gone. As such, I've had this transition period where I was used to evading aircraft by pulling negative G's maneuver in the middle of my rolls to throw off their aim, and trying to apply that on this aircraft and seeing my wings just fall off time after time after time. Out of all the deaths I've had as an aircraft, whipping my wings in a negative G turn probably account for half of them. That's how easily they do break. So you do definitely have to keep that in mind. So when you're trying to evade an enemy, try to keep it in positive G maneuvers. And that's pretty much all I can tell you about this aircraft. Let's recap how it performs then. 420mm cannons, lots of ammo, can carry you the entire match. Not exactly a competitive top tier jet, it's more of a support fighter, but is very good in that role, so do stick close to your teammates. You can use the awesome roll rate and turn rate to evade very easily, but do avoid to do negative G turns. And you can also use the carrier hook to land on carriers. In combined battles, you can evade AA fire quite effectively, however, your wings are quite large and as such present a very big target. On top of that, your ordnance is limited to what, well, compared to the F9F-8, in that you can only carry bombs. 2 1,000-pounder bombs, which can only be dropped 2 at the same time, or 4 500-pounder bombs, which can be dropped in 2 sets. No rockets, sadly. The 20 mils can be used against open-top vehicles, but those you generally don't tend to find at this tier, and as such, its use is limited in that role. However, maybe with the upcoming boats, which have little armor, we might be seeing some more use for those cannons. But you know what? Those have been just my experiences. Maybe you'll find this thing to be completely different, maybe you'll find another playstyle. I think it's safe to say that Cougar is definitely not nearly as bad as the Sea Venom. And in the right hands, it's quite a fun little aircraft. Anyways guys, if you are new around here, do check out my channel, we have plenty of videos over there. Last video was a rangefinder tutorial for tanks, which has been really blowing up. Holy crap, you guys really enjoyed that video, so do definitely check it out if you haven't done so yet. And that's it for today. Subscribe if you're new around here, like this video if you did, leave some suggestions in the comments down below for what you want to see next, and check back for the next video. My name is MikeGoesBoom. Thanks for watching.
Your head up to the sky, take a deeper breath and give it time. You can walk the path among the lines with your shattered frame of mind. Or instead you could always stay. We can wait right here and play until somehow you can find